Thank you, Matt. Thanks for your time. Means a lot, probably more than you can imagine, given my own history in trying to be a drummer, and you were the one up there, right? I grew up with the Use Your Illusion albums and wasted my youth trying to figure out what you did there, because there was no YouTube to lead me through it.
Right? Yeah, no YouTube.
No YouTube, nothing of that nature.
Yeah.
So this passion for creation, but also getting the business of your business.
Yeah.
And also this awareness of current developments, which is what defines those who are in it for the long run and not just for a short term. And you've proven that, you've been through different stages. And this is also true for companies, for innovators. It's easy to do, not easy, but it's comparatively easy to do one thing, but to reinvent, to come back, to always be relevant and not sell out, that is unique. So how did you hone that? Would you agree with that, first of all, and how did you hone that? How did it all come together for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it came from, being a drummer and surviving, really. Yeah, I think a lot of what's happened in my career has been basically about survival. I've been in so many bands, and, obviously the pinnacle moment was probably Guns N' Roses to really put me on the map, if you will. And not a household name, but if you're a fan of Guns N' Roses, and there's a lot of them, I'm a known guy, right? So I think when I realized that was really something that I could use in my best interest was probably Velvet Revolver, which was when we put that band together. We were called a super group, but now I'm a founding member of my own band, and then, the success we had with that was a real feather in my cap, and I was a little bit more mature in what I could do with that, if that makes any sense. During the years of Guns N' Roses and the Cult even, I think the focus was purely on the music and the drumming and being in a band and enjoying that experience. And then as I got older, and I'd gone through these hills and valleys of the music business, I realized that I needed to find other things to keep myself occupied, current, moving forward. People look at me now and they see my hair or whatever, and they go, wow, you look completely different. So I've always considered myself sort of a forward-thinking kind of guy, and I try to stay now. And I appreciate like everything that I've done and everywhere I've come from, but I like to challenge myself. So when other things started presenting themselves to me based on the fact that I had this name from this band that was very world famous, and I give credit to Guns N' Roses, different opportunities presented themselves. And then when they did present themselves, I had to be open enough to be able to say, hey, I can do that, or I could try to do that. And that's basically how I got into the tech world, the blockchain world. And it's funny because that came out of Brazil. My partners in the company that I run with them is called Sorum, and the first startup we started together is called Artbit. And that came out of Brazil based on my notoriety. In Brazil, we were like the Beatles, right?
Right.
So they came to me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of this idea that was a startup, right? And I loved the way it sounded, and I was intrigued. So I very quickly got into learning what it is about blockchain and Bitcoin and everything else that goes with that package. And kind of like I learned how to navigate the music business, really.
Right.
I learned as I went.
So you got the skills and you apply them in different areas.
Basically, yeah.
Maybe let's get into the blockchain part, which is obviously fascinating, and now especially today with the announcements of Facebook and Libra and so forth, it's sort of moving almost mainstream. But again, you were an early mover in this one, but I think the interesting part is obviously if one understands the potential of blockchain, what it does. It has the potential to correct something that has happened with the digital revolution, especially in the music industry, where a lot has changed, but in particular the artists were handed a really bad card deck, if you like. And with the disintermediation and all of that of blockchain, that could be changed. And I guess that's also what's driving Artbit, your your blockchain venture to some degree. Could you explain it a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, with blockchain, I've been invited to a lot of conventions and summits.
Even the VEF last year, the World
Yeah,
Economic Forum.
I was in Marrakesh with Richard Branson and Sergey Brin from Google, who's, here's Sergey Brin at an event trying to find out what's happening with this blockchain momentum. And, that was last year, this summer, actually.
Yes, Eva Kiley was there as well.
Yeah. And so, they invited me as sort of a different aspect or a different thinker on why that will work for music and art. And you got to look at music and what happened to us in the digital age, and musicians, and we were all sort of taken back. The people at what I call the ivory tower, the higher ups decided, oh, we're going to digitize this music and we're going to give you this amount of money, and you don't really have much to say about it. You got to remember, the record business were offered an early version of the digital Napster style, streaming, right, or downloading at that time. And they didn't agree to. They say, why do we need that? We've got CDs, and we've got,
Right.
Why would we need that? And they balked at it, just like they're balking at blockchain.
Right.
So you've got to cut the fat to be able to recreate a new universe, right? So the musicians, we had to reinvent ourselves. We had to go out and tour more. We had to sell more merchandise. We had to figure out how to now promote ourselves on social media. When in the old days, rock and roll was all about mystique. Now it's about, hey, look at me, I'm in Switzerland and I'm playing tonight. And, I mean, what happened, right? And now they come to us and ask us what our social media numbers are like. Like it's our job to do their job. And that's where I got really into a disruption sort of a feeling, like this is all wrong, because I got tired of hearing that same thing. I've produced younger artists, and they say, well, what are their numbers like, and how much social media they have, and they started signing YouTube stars, and they started basically not having to do any work. They were signing up, taking the larger bulk of the percentage, and really riding coattails of somebody that had already presented themselves in the digital world. So when it comes to the music business and then the publishing game, it's the old guard still. You've got the old guard, you got the ivory tower guys that don't want to lose their jobs, because blockchain can alleviate a lot of that. Blockchain could come in the publishing game, and basically, as you stream or download, which a lot of people aren't even downloading anymore, right? The numbers can be all in the blockchain, and everyone can get distributed at some point, digital currency or tokens, in real time.
Yes, not waiting a couple of years until you get the check.
That's possible now. Why are we waiting quarterly? Why are we waiting for our money? Because why? It's going into a bank account and a stream, and there's all these players along the way administrating that fee that eventually gets back to the artist. Who gets screwed again? The artist. When I say to people, oh, I don't understand blockchain, I don't understand Bitcoin, I say Bitcoin isn't going to Vegas and getting rich. Bitcoin is a protocol that people are going to build on top of. Imagine Bitcoin being the new internet, and you build your platform on top, and everything rolls out that way. And then Ether and all the other platforms are basically, I don't want to say carbon copies, because they're not. They're a little bit different. But they're protocols to be able to build on top of. So, the future for this is now, and it's going to happen, but it's just about these guys that say no. Like, there's many people trying to solve the publishing problem. But it's just going to be a matter of time. Just like digital music when it was digitized, when Metallica fought Napster first because they knew something was wrong with that picture. Once again, the artist is the one that's getting hurt in this equation, right? So that became like a new rock and roll rebellion in me. When I was able to voice my opinion of what I thought was wrong with the music business, there's a solution. And that's what's cool about blockchain.
Absolutely. I think the technology as such will be a infrastructure technology like the internet or electricity. We won't think about it too much in the future, but it will have a huge transformatory effect as the internet did, right? So here's the chance to reverse some things, to change the game, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's interesting time. So maybe you want to get a little bit into your startup, into ArtBit, what it exactly does, what's the plan behind it?
Yeah, just to give you a little bit overview on ArtBit. Basically, when we think content online, I need people to understand, or we need people to understand, that content provided is making other people valuable, right? It's not making you valuable. You don't own that intellectual property. When you put your material up on Facebook or Instagram, or wherever you launch that content, it's now owned. Yeah, you can put your little watermark on your photograph. You could do all that. But the reality is, it's public domain. But the content is making Facebook rich. You're building another company, So conceptually, ArtBit is a camera that's going to work in the blockchain realm, and it's going to tokenize people creating content, along with artists, audience, and brands. So the brands are going to be able to basically use the world as their directors, if you will. And the only way that will work is in the blockchain, because the data will be able to be seen by all the players. So it's a bit of a game, it's a camera, and it's a community.
Right.
So the tokenized system will be based on how many shares, how many likes, how many consumers of your content that you have. And that's the future. Owning your own intellectual property, being your own person. Now, instead of giving all this data out, the thing that's frustrating is what's been happening with artificial intelligence and constantly getting tagged for cookies and giving your data away. They're asking you right there to push a button and say, we now have you, right? There's going to be a time when people can go and switch over and save themselves from this data exposure. And I think people are going to get fed up with this constant, pummel, if you will, of artificial intelligence and targeting. And that's what's been happening in brands. A lot of people don't understand or know, because it's a third world problem, if you will, that the Zika virus is still out there. There's a bunch of tropical diseases that have no cures, but still hundreds of thousands of people are dying from it. So viral cure will give an opportunity for everyone to be able to have medicine for cures. And the thing that's interesting about blockchain is everybody in the world, if they've got an antibodies are the savior of the planet. There might be one guy with an antibody across the world that can save somebody in a completely different country because he's got that antibody. Right. But how do you get that information? What is that guy going to do with the antibody? Go to the doctor and say, hey, I've been cured of this and I'm an antibody. We're going to allow the information to be on the blockchain. Amazing. And that could be a really amazing step forward. And you got to remember, a lot of funding for pharmaceuticals comes from big conglomerates. So they swoop in, and they put up the A-series funding or whatever and then they own that particular patent for that medicine, and then it goes to Pfizer and Merck, and then we all can't afford it. Maybe here in Switzerland you have a better healthcare system than we do, but in America, there's this conglomerate. They're all in bed together, if you will. Doctors, pharmaceuticals. Why can't people have access to healthcare that's reasonable, right? But that's another bureaucracy that we have to cut through. The old guard, right? Especially in America. There's a lot of things that can happen with blockchain that are like...
This is where the disintermediation comes in, right?
Oh,
get rid of all of that structure.
Yeah. People should be allowed to be able to have access. But there's billionaires out there controlling these hubs of what runs this planet. Right? It's going to be interesting to see this unfold. And like you said, there'll be a time when we go to the grocery store and we have our tokens or cryptocurrency. Some people get weird when you say the word cryptocurrency, so I like to say tokens. Right. And there you do it. You know, it doesn't have to be Apple Pay, and where Apple Pay's taking a percentage again. Well, this is your coin wallet, and share it the way you want.
Right.
Decentralized.
It's basically, you know, I would say the internet changed the way we interact, and blockchain is going to change the way we transact.
That's right.
So it's going to be a game changer. So I think, you know, I'm already sitting here and like, okay, so this is somebody who emerged from the Sunset Strip scene in the 80s. This is not what you would associate, but if you want to spin that one forward, I had the pleasure to participate or be a guest at the Adopt the Arts event you put on at the Fonda a couple of years ago, so I didn't manage to go to this year's with Moby. But that was amazing. First of all, it was an amazing concert with all the people up there, but also the message, right? And what you're trying to do there, which again is something that people wouldn't expect. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Adopt the Arts came organically as well. As I get older, I get a little bit, my thought process is completely different. Like I said, when I was younger, here I was playing rock and roll and really just living it. You know what I mean? And then you get a little older and you start thinking outside of yourself or whatever. I'm not saying I was like, completely self-absorbed. I wasn't. But I was just, completely emerged. And, I've been through a lot of different sort of, like I said, hills and valleys in music. And then when I started learning about what was happening in public education and music and art, I was invited to go to the White House with Yo-Yo Ma, famous cello player, child prodigy. And we went and spoke and lobbied on Capitol Hill, and he gave an amazing speech at the Kennedy Center about the testing system in America, which is called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And he added arts to the equation. So his idea of a new testing system for education is called STEAM. And we include the arts. And what I really got from that was so inspiring. And you can look it up online, but it's beautiful conceptually about what he's talking about. Because here we are, a modern world based on innovation and creativity. Everything on the internet is innovation. Where are the kids going to learn innovation if not through art and music? I mean, look at me. Here I am, a drummer, high school graduate, and I've developed into this whole other guy based on music and art because I have a creative mind. I have that mind that thinks forward or outside the box. So I always tell people, look, I'm doing Adopt the Arts for kids to keep music in school, keep them in music, because they're cutting the arts across the board for public. Right. And I say, this isn't about them going to play music and just having music and it's an extracurricular activity. This is much deeper than that. Right. They're going to take this forward. They're going to become the next directors at Google, or they're going to go to Facebook, or you don't know, because they've sparked something within themselves based on what they've learned in this music class. And then the flip side of the coin is the problem in America is the public school system. Those kids that are left without this extracurricular activity are going to be the ones that are left out. And I say to people, what happens then? Well, they don't elevate themselves to become a kid that's going to want to stay in school. And if you know the statistics in America, we have a very large percentage of dropouts at the high school rate. At that point, we've got a problem. People go, I don't want to pay extra taxes for education. I say, okay, then you can pay extra taxes for the prison system, which is $65 billion federally a year. Crazy. We house 25% of the prisoners of the world, when America is only 5% of the population of the world. Why is that? And my belief is privatized prison system, backed with health, which they're inside that, security. There's a lot of money being made there. So why not build more prisons? Fill them up. But who gets hit with that bill? It's back to us again. The American taxpayer that is now paying 3 or 4 or 5 times as much for a prisoner as they could have paid for a kid. $7,000 in the state of California to $50,000 for a prisoner, right?
Great.
150 to 200 on death row, which now has been relinquished in California. So when I heard these statistics, I was like, oh my God, this is even more of a reason for me to be inside of this and inspire these kids like I was inspired when I was a kid.
Right.
And the inspiration came from my music teacher.
Right.
He believed in me. He came to me and he said, Matt, I think you have what it takes to become a professional.
Right.
Right? Just that alone, that was it. I was done. I was like, somebody believes in me. So when they see me, and I come along and I say, hey man, you're a really amazing kid. You got a great voice. Or you can play drums. I love it. So that's what I do with Adopt the Arts. And I'm trying to build that up. I'm working with brands on that. At some point we could drop into the blockchain and
Right.
people can fund that way. And it'll be.
You know why I think it's so important as well? Obviously there's the negative side with the prisons, but on the other side, I believe that most of the kids going to school today will be working in jobs that haven't even been invented yet, right? So how do you prepare and educate them for them? The
That's
arts
right.
is the only thing
That's
you
right.
can do.
Yeah, I mean, the world's only going to become more innovative. I mean, look at every day we're getting a new app to have something delivered to our house, or look at the state of the world in the last few years. Real estate, Airbnb, Uber, Uber Eats, Postmate. I mean, the list goes on and on. Who's inventing this stuff? Who's coming up with these ideas? And that's even going to be even deeper once we get the blockchain starts to become a reality, and we need these innovators, these creative people to come in and solve all these modern problems. Transportation is completely changed. It's going to change even more. It's going to be new ways to look at life, and that's going to be the new generation. And the next generation is going to come from a world of creativity.
Right.
And I truly believe that stems from music, art, and then they blossom into the next innovators. So it's super important that we keep more music and art and visual arts, those sorts of things, but more computers in kids' lives that can learn through that instead of a lot of the old school way of thinking is just still there.
Right.
It's like how we were supposed to eat when we were kids. Oh, you need the food groups, and when they find out later that all these different foods aren't necessary for your body, and people are learning more about food and how to eat properly, and you come to Europe and food's fresher and people are maybe thinner. You go to America and you understand there's too much sugar in everything, there's too much of this, there's too much of that, and we're force-fed a lot of stuff. We just need to be educated on a constant basis to be able to understand the new world.
Right. Maybe you've been through a lot. And by the way, I'm waiting for that book. I'm waiting for the Matt Sorum biography.
Yeah.
First day buyer here. And you're quite outspoken sometimes that you've made mistakes, and everybody does. But the question is not the mistakes you made, the question is what you learned from them. So there's a lot of young people out there starting out as artists, as innovators. So if you could go back, or what have you learned? What would you share with them? What piece of advice would you pass on?
Well, starting out, being a young guy in rock and roll, you learn as you go. And I would say to any younger person, you're going to learn as you go. You're going to make mistakes. Learn from your mistakes. I'm a kind of, I've got things about myself that are sort of ingrained. I'm a loyalist. I'm a Scorpio. I'm an A personality. I've got all these things that I have to kind of work with. But I'm starting to tap into what what the best qualities of myself are. Find your best qualities, understand them, and don't be afraid to try things. That's life. I mean, that's what I learned. To not be afraid. You're only going to get one or two answers, yes or no, and just go for it. Manifest your destiny and go after it. I mean, that's the beauty of the world, and especially now that you can communicate. Here I am meeting you. We've been talking digitally, right? The other day I met a guy from the Maldives, where I've been helping with turtles there. We finally met after 4 years of communicating. There's so many ways to communicate. You can do anything you want in this life.
Absolutely.
So I just say go after it. If you fall down, get back up. I mean, that's the old story.
Right.
And keep trying. As an entrepreneur, that's the end game with any entrepreneurship. Is you're going to have a lot of failures along the way, right? But you just keep moving. And if you look at any of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, they've probably had 100 failures before they had the one success. And especially in the tech world and the digital world, they're so crowded of a space with everyone coming up with these ideas. But you know what? You come out on top, and then the rest is history, right? It's like, for me, I look at it like that.
Right.
I'm like, if I would have never gotten Guns N' Roses, that wouldn't have turned into Revolver. That wouldn't have turned into Deadland Ritual. It's all part of the story, right? And that wouldn't have turned into Art Bit. That wouldn't have turned into this. That's because I made intuitive decisions based on how I feel in my gut. So go with your gut. Make an intuitive decision that feels right for you. And kick ass, basically.
Very good. And I have a final question, which is just for me. Obviously, having studied all of your music, I kind of can hear a Sorum on any kind of record. But if you would have to define what are the key elements of your setup, I mean, sometimes you have 2 bass drums, sometimes 1, but which are the key elements that define your sound?
Well, I think everybody that plays has a different way of approaching it, but, it's a certain way that I hit, I guess, and I like to tune the drums a certain way. But I think all drummers, that's the one quality that as drummers we all sound different. No 2 drummers sound exactly the same, because it's all internal. The internal clock of your heart and the rhythm of your life or whatever. But my sound is based on the way I like to tune the drums. The energy that I put into it is passion driven. Right. I still love playing. Playing is just a feeling for me. And then all the history from behind me that I've learned along the way, I take into my performance, And I still get great satisfaction out of it. And people ask, well, why are you doing another band? You're being so successful at all these other things that you're doing. And I said, well, I still need to play because that's where I come from.
Right.
And I want to remain viable. And this is another challenge, Deadland Ritual. Can I make this successful with my 3 guys, partners in my band? Can I do this again? It's a tougher hill to climb every time.
Right.
But people can say whatever they want about the band. They can say, I don't like it, I do like it. I say, well, put a band together and give it a shot, because it isn't easy. Nothing's easy. And there's an old expression, the older you get, the harder you got to work. That's true. Here I am in rock and roll. I'm 58 years old. I'm still doing it. But I look at Steven Tyler or Mick Jagger or Paul McCartney, and that gives me hope.
Right.
Never too old. Paul McCartney turned 77. He's still out there playing. Mick Jagger, same age. I see them, I'm like, I'm a kid. I could go another 20 years.
Right.
And at that point, things will work themselves out along the way, right? New things will present themselves, and then you have to be open enough to be able to, pull that in and go, oh, I can do that. And that's how my whole life's been. I haven't had a steady job my whole life. And I don't get afraid about it anymore. I used to. I used to be like, oh my God, the band broke up. Now what? Fear. Fear is the killer. So I say to people, don't be afraid, man. Just move through the fear and know that life is going to present challenges. But it's how you take on that challenge and how you make it work for you for the next thing. So
I think that's a strong theme in your career. You know, you've always come back all guns blazing and always surprising people with the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's been amazing. Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
And keep up the great work. Thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks.
Can't wait for the show.
Cool.